I work in advertising. I know a lot of agents. I know other producers. So what can I do to start moving the ball forward? And honestly, one of my fears was, what are people going to say about this? Like, I am of a
Mm.
particular age. I've been doing a particular job for a while. I mean, I was literally afraid that people were going to be like, "Who do you think you are? Like, you're you're not supposed to be doing this. We don't want you." So I had to remind myself that just because I think it doesn't make it so, like not to believe everything my mind tells me.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a
We only have
surprise
so many
outbreak
beds.
is the issue of
This is not
pandemic.
how I
No
thought I
social
would end
distancing
college.
at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the
One
mask?
expert
Where's the
says
glove?
a second wave is
We all need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling. If you're a regular listener to my show, then you know by now that I'm always excited to introduce you to intriguing creatives who are making a positive impact in their fields of expertise. Today, I'm especially excited for this conversation, as in some ways, I feel like this particular guest and I have been doppelgangers in both experiences and creative choices. She also happens to share one of my core beliefs that it's never too late to pursue one's dreams. Now a full-time voice and on-camera actor, as well as voiceover coach, Jenn Sims was deep into her career as a director of broadcast at one of LA's top ad agencies. She worked on hundreds of commercials with talent agents and casting directors and listened to thousands of voice actor auditions. She also directed voice actors, including Emmy and Oscar winners, such as Donald Sutherland as the voice for a national healthcare campaign, and produced network promos starring the incomparable voice legend Don LaFontaine. As glamorous as the world of advertising appears to be in the content it creates, it can also be, as Jenn says, very toxic, and her work environment was becoming increasingly so, prompting Jenn to reflect on what she really wanted to do when she began her career in the first place, that of being an actress. As she spent years honing her quirky sense of humor while studying comedy and improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade, the Groundlings, which landed her on-camera commercials for Uber, Snapchat, and WebMD, and the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Los Angeles. It was during a recording session that Jenn realized her passion for acting was undiminished and made the decision to quit her job to pursue a full-time career in voiceover. However, in Jenn's words, she was older than most people who would pursue full-time acting. And for anyone who is familiar with how youth-oriented show business is, especially in Los Angeles, it wasn't exactly a textbook recipe for success. Leaving that coveted director of broadcast position was a huge risk, but one she was willing to take. And so Jenn took that leap. I'd like to extend the net by welcoming actor, storyteller, coach, and smarty pants, Jennifer Sims, to 19 Stories.
Oh my gosh, Cheryl, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was just amazing. Thank you. That's just delightful to hear.
Thank you for having a delightful career in life.
Yeah, it's been a checkered one, that's for sure. But I think most of us, I mean, I just talk to so many creatives and so many of us are doing encore careers, or maybe you're doing a little bit of your former vocation and folding in, like, as we say, creativity does not age. And so why would we just say it's too late for us? It might be too late to start early, but it's not too late to start. So,
ooh, I like that. I really love that.
Oh,
That should be either a t-shirt or a bumper sticker. And
yeah, it's got to be on a mug somewhere at Home Goods or something like that.
yeah, Home Goods. Well, thank you for joining me. And, I am so excited about you being here with me today. How are you in Los Angeles doing?
Doing great. Like you, had a big old heat wave. So our fall, and I'm in Los Angeles. I know you're up in Northern California. I love Northern California, by the way. But things are booked and busy and cool, but not weather-wise. It's warm here still.
I want to dive into all things Jenn, but before we do, my answer in regards to the question you posed on Instagram as to which celebrity do you remind folks of?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here I go. I would say, sans the nose, you have a hint of Christine Baranski in both looks and vibe.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how often I get that, and I love
Oh,
it
okay,
because
cool,
she is
cool.
the best. I've never met her, but she just seems like somebody I would really love to hang out with, and of course, her talent is immense, and she is definitely, I'm a fan. I stand for Christine, but yeah, I get that a lot.
Oh,
People,
good, good,
like,
good, good. Okay.
vibe-wise and looks, I totally see it. I get it. Yeah,
Oh,
I'll
good.
take it all day long.
Okay, yeah, she's one of my favorites,
Yeah.
and so when you asked that question, I went, "Well, no brainer," but then I thought, "Oh my gosh, what if she doesn't think so?"
I only wish I was even a little bit as talented as Christine Baranski, and I certainly think she's adorable, so if I look like her, hey, I'll take it.
And you're adorable. You are
Yep.
absolutely adorable, and I mentioned that you and I have made similar creative
Yeah,
choices,
yeah.
and over the past year, our paths have intersected a couple of times, along with the realization that we both attended the Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Exactly.
We've both been ad agency producers, although with you being at the top of your field, featured in Bold Journey and Canvas Rebel magazines.
Thank
So I
you.
thought it was about time, girlfriend, that
Yeah,
we had a
I
conversation.
know, I wish one of these days to be IRL. As you know from my Instagram, I love being in real life with people, and we just have so
Yeah.
much in common, Cheryl, that it's sort of surprising that our paths have not crossed sooner or more often in person or, just in real life, but
Well, you know what? I hate LA's a hop, skip, and a jump. Okay, so let's talk about your story of origin by
sure.
sharing a bit about growing up in the beautiful area known as Santa Barbara, California,
Yeah. Thank
which
you.
obviously is fertile soil for creativity, as you and Kay Bess are both from Santa
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
as well as many celebrities who now call it home.
James, Arnold Taylor, I believe, was Jat. Do you know him?
No, I
Other
don't
voice
know.
actor? He is, from Santa Barbara also, as I recall. I know I'm getting his name. He's a primarily, I'm sorry, an animation actor,
Okay.
and, yeah, lots of Santa Barbarans. Yeah, James Arnold Taylor. I always when you have 3 names, I'm like, "Did I get all 3 of those names
Did I
right?"
put them in the right order?
Right, it's like, "Sorry, James," but we call him Jat. He goes by Jat.
Hey, Jat.
Yeah,
Shout out to Jat.
he's a cool cat.
Ooh, Jat's a cool cat. I
There
like
you
that.
go, there you go. Yeah.
So is that because there's a lot of theater? My dad was in Goleta in Santa Barbara
Yeah.
for about 30 years. He was very
Oh,
involved with the Santa Barbara Light Opera Company and doing lots of theater there. So is that where your love of theater began?
it really began in high school, and I guess I'm gonna do some name dropping. I went to high school with, Katie Huffman, who's a Tony winner, Anthony Edwards,
Oh my
Eric
gosh.
Stoltz. They were all in classes ahead of me.
Really?
Yeah, but we were a very theatrically oriented high school, and we had fantastic, drama teachers and drama coaches, and the theater scene was very robust, and so I just got bitten by the bug straight away in high school. Unlike I mean, I always feel weird saying, "Had a really great time in high school," because I know high school is so fraught for so many of us, but I
But
was
it's
just
good to hear the stories where people were happy in high school. It
yeah,
doesn't have
yeah,
to all be gloom and doom and
yeah.
years of on the therapy couch
Right.
afterwards.
That's for later. No,
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's after working and no, I'm kidding. I'm just making a joke there. No, I just really enjoyed my high school experience. I had great friends. I really enjoyed being in the drama department and being coached and being in shows. And so when I was 16, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts came to town and they said,
Ah,
you can
that's
on
how it happened.
yeah, that's how it
Okay.
happened. They were holding open auditions for their summer program, and I was like, "Well, that's for me," and I just on my own I don't even think I told my parents. I was just like, "I'm gonna audition." I auditioned, I got accepted, but of course, the program was down in Los Angeles, and, things were different back then. My parents were like, "Okay, well, we'll help you do the you're clearly passionate, and we see some talent in you, or somebody does." And so I lived on my own for about 6 weeks during the program. My
And
dad
you were 16,
I was
right?
16, yeah,
That's remarkable.
I know.
That actually is one of my questions. Where did you stay at age 16 to
So
do that?
yeah, my dad at the time was in real estate in Santa Barbara, and so he called another,
Ah,
affiliate
okay.
office in Los Angeles, and there was a woman who said, "Well, my family and I have a guest house, and your daughter can stay in that." So I literally stayed in this lovely guest house for 6 weeks, and we paid her, of course, But the funny thing to me was, like, I drove by myself from Santa Barbara to LA, and I
You go, girl.
and I just
Wow.
can't but here's the funny thing, Cheryl, I wouldn't let a 16-year-old drive across town, and I'm like, here I am at 16, like, driving
Driving all the way.
2 hours from
Yes.
Santa Barbara to
Thanks,
LA.
mom and dad. Don't mind that I die.
Yeah, they had a lot of confidence in my ability, and I was a very headstrong teenager, and I really knew what I wanted. I mean, it was just
Obviously,
I
yeah.
simply was not going to be deterred, and as a matter of fact, when I graduated high school, my family thought, "Well, we're in Santa Barbara, why don't you just do a year at City and, stay for another year after high school?" I'm like, "See ya." I mean, I literally packed up the car once again. I got accepted again to the program,
So
and
you got accepted
to
into
the
the
2-year.
2-year program.
Yeah, down here
Okay.
in Los Angeles, and I'm like, Bye." I just left. I mean, I told them, they knew I was going, but that was when they weren't really happy because being, an actor's life is freelance, it's precarious, it can be spotty, and they were nervous for me, but
So you were 18 at the time? Did
I
you
was
graduate at
18.
18?
Mhm. I was
Wow.
18 at the time. I graduated in August. Oh, I'm sorry, in June, but August, I left Santa Barbara
Oh
and
my
moved
gosh,
out
just
with.
really directly thereafter. So, for those who may not be familiar with the Academy of Dramatic Arts, there's one in Los Angeles, there's one in New York City, and I
Mhm.
went to the summer session in New York, wanted to go to their 2-year program. That's my story later on
I'll
as to
interview
why I
you.
didn't, but so for those who aren't familiar with the Academy, talk about what their program covers in the initial 6 weeks and how it works to get into the 2-year program that you eventually enrolled in.
Right, so as a 16-year-old, they asked us to do monologues, and so I showed up at, like, Bath Street in, Santa Barbara with my monologue prepared. I think I coached on it with my drama coach at high school, and they accepted me, and so the 6-week program was very similar to the 2-year program. Now, the program when I went was very theatrically oriented, so we studied voice and speech and movement, Shakespeare, scene study, plays, but currently, I mean, I haven't looked at their curriculum lately, but I think they're much more film and television oriented because obviously that's
It's
where
LA,
it's
yeah.
LA, but and so the 2-year program, just a broader, more extensive exploration of those, voice, speech, Shakespeare movement, scene study, and we would have exams, and those were our productions. We put on
Mhm.
little mini productions, and we were graded on those, performances, so
Did you ever take their sword class?
no, I never you know what? Honestly, Cheryl, I'm so been was there so long ago, I don't even know that they had that when I was there.
Yeah, I was th I think you and I are similar ages. So, yeah, the well
39? No, I'm kidding.
yes,
Forever.
me, and Jack Benny,
Yeah, exactly.
39.
Such an old yeah, such a
Anyone who doesn't understand that, look it up.
right.
Yeah, they had it at the one in New York, but you know what's pretty scary, and I'm digressing because it is all about you, but I will tell you,
No, I wanna
I
hear it.
took their makeup class. Did you take the stage makeup
No,
for stage?
I think here in LA, they just kept it very basic to voice, music, or not music, but, like, voice and singing, Shakespeare and scene study and those sorts of things, and I don't know why in our 6-week program or even our 2-year program, we did not get into, or at least I should say I didn't do those things. I won't say that they didn't offer them.
It's just a matter of probably what you sign up for, but I
Yes.
took their makeup class, and so one of the things you had to do, because you mentioned they grade you, is we had to age ourselves.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. I found a picture of myself recently, and I
And
went, "I look like my makeup!"
you
And I said, "Did I project this on myself?
oh,
Did I do
no.
this
Or
to
did you just do
myself?"
such a great job of, like, knowing yourself and your face?
I love that. We'll go with that.
I'd love to see that
Okay.
picture on the Instagram, please.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. That's not gonna happen. S So you
Funny.
graduate with all of this wonderful training,
Mm,
and then you do what a lot of actors do to support their dreams. You
mhm.
wait tables, you
Yeah.
work retail, whatever.
Yep.
But how did you manage to begin working for one of the biggest ad agencies in the business as a director of broadcast?
So, I got very, very lucky, and I had a wonderful neighbor when, I was waiting tables and going to school, and basically going to her apartment and crying on her couch, like, I want to be an actress in this
No
and
one
just
hires me, and I don't get it.
I know, it was a real sad sack. It was frustrating, right? We all I mean,
Right.
creatives
It's
know what
real,
this
though.
is
It's
like,
real.
and
The struggle's
the
real.
struggle is real, and when people would say, "Oh, you're an actress, what restaurant do you work at?" I would be like,
I just
"Oh,
do you wanna deck them? Do you
my
just wanna
god."
deck them?
I'd like to find all those people now and go, "I am doing
Right.
fine." So obviously, I did not start as director of broadcast. I started in the creative department of this enormous agency in Los Angeles because my neighbor was an art director. And she's like, "Well,
Okay.
hey, this job opened up, and I don't know if you're interested." She couldn't even get the words out of her mouth fast enough. And I said, "I'll take it. Just give it. I don't care what it is. Just give it to me." And it was being the receptionist in the creative department. And I loved working at this first agency. It was one of the bigger ones in LA. We were winning Clios and Beldings and One Show awards, so we were doing some pretty high-end creative. I think I mentioned, at least somewhere in my materials, one of the first commercials I worked on is not the, like, full-fledged producer, but, like, as the assistant producer, was
Mhm.
Michael Bay was the director, and
Yeah, yes, I did read that, and I was gonna put it in there, but I don't know why I in your intro, I don't know why I left that out. Ooh, share a little bit about that.
he he was interesting straight out of the gate. We were shooting a clothing, like a fashion line, and
Mhm.
we were using these beautiful, just outstandingly gorgeous female models because they were modeling this fashion line. And I remember the executive producer on the scene. I think we were shooting at the Gray. I always want to call it the Greystone Mansion here in Beverly Hills. And I heard our producer get on the phone and very tensely say, "He's already shot over 10,000 feet of film. We are already over budget. We
I
haven't even
bet.
shot
Oh
it
my
for 3
gosh.
hours."
Oh my
So we,
gosh.
just fun little things like that would, of course, back in the
Fun
day,
little
fun
things.
little things like that where you go over budget because Michael Bay's like,
Michael
"I'm
Bay. He's
Michael
Michael
Bay."
Bay.
Yes, he was an interesting cat too, but, so I did love working in advertising. As I said, started at the bottom, just answering phones in the creative department just all day long going, "Creative, creative." And,
But that's the best way you get
I
to
loved
learn
it.
who everybody
I
is,
loved
right?
it. I actually met my husband at that agency, so I
Really?
suppose I should talk more about, like, that's another reason I loved advertising. I've met some of my favorite people, including my husband, so
And what capacity was he working
he
there in?
was working in the what we called the studio, but they did, art and paste up, and, we used to call it the bullpen, so it was where you'd take, like, print. He was
Mhm.
working more on print, I was working on broadcast, and, we secretly started date but everyone knew we were young and dumb and couldn't keep a secret to save our lives, so
Well,
everyone's like, "Are you guys
you are
dating?" We're
in
like, "No."
advertising, right?
Exactly. Everybody was
So
dating.
oh gosh, yeah, I could tell
You
you
remember,
stories of
yeah.
yes, it was almost like a dorm or
Yeah.
like being in college or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
So can you give our listeners some insight as to what exactly a director of broadcast does for an agency?
Yeah, so when I left and I was the director of broadcast, I was overseeing all aspects of production for radio and television commercials. Actually, at the time when I was working as the director of broadcast, I was mostly working on promos. That's why I worked with Don. May he rest in peace, Don LaFontaine. He was so
Mm.
wonderful. So I would hire freelance producers if we were really, really busy and needed additional support. So my job was to bring people onto the team, then release people from the team. My job was to listen to lots and lots of voice actor auditions if we were casting voices, if we weren't using like the voice of the network, which would be somebody like Don, or if we were working on Fox, Joe Cipriano, and another brilliant talent. I would also attend casting sessions if we were doing on-camera commercials. And then, of course, I was in charge of creating budgets and keeping us on budget. So I watched a lot of time, budgets, and numbers along the years.
Which is perfect, perfect, perfect training for what we're going to talk about in a moment. Sidebar for a moment. Have you been to the new studios, Don LaFontaine Studios, since they reopened at
I
SAG?
No, I saw the invite come over for the open house. I was busy that time, so I'm dying to go. Though
It looks
it looks
gorgeous.
fantastic.
It looks good. I think George Whittam designed one of the main studios in there for the reopening, if
Yeah,
I'm not
I'm sure he
mistaken.
did because I know George did the original lab,
Oh, okay.
DO lab.
Okay.
So I would imagine that he probably had a hand in this one too. But yeah, I've seen it online and it looks fantastic. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it does. That's one of the real treasures of living in Los Angeles is
yeah,
having that available to you. And,
exactly.
I mentioned in your intro that your job was becoming very toxic. Can you share how so and how that led to your epiphany one day when you're in session and you just said it's time to pursue my
Yeah,
heart's desire and return to acting?
for sure. I'm trying to think about how to say this without really throwing anybody under the bus. By the time I left, I was working for a smaller agency. And it was a really kind of, it wasn't a mom and pop necessarily, but there were two major principals who owned the place, another vice president, and they just had really bare bones, the staff. So when I came in as director of broadcast, they had pretty much misrepresented what their expectation was. And so my
Mm.
expectations weren't lining up with theirs. And they were, in my opinion, toxic because they would scream and yell. They
Oh
would
my
yell at the
gosh.
staff. They would yell at me. They would really, there was one guy who will remain nameless, but he was, part of the company. And he was just beyond the pale, Cheryl. And I had an assistant and he would just dress me down in front of my assistant, and I was like, "This just can't come on. This just
No,
can't
no, that
be
is
right."
just so rock bottom. It
And
really is.
the thing that really tore it for me, and maybe this is just me being, I don't know, not I wanna say maybe I was just being a baby, but I don't think so. One of the principals, so one of the owners had called myself on a Saturday and, our assistant on a Saturday, but didn't leave a message, so neither one of us apparently called him back, and this was like, well, it's a Saturday afternoon. I assumed he had just misdialed me because he hadn't left me a message, and I
Mhm.
walk in Monday morning to an email saying, "You didn't answer the phone on the weekend, and if you do that again, you're gonna be suspended for 3 days without pay." And I was like,
Okay.
You can't set me up for failure like this. I would
No,
have
and
happily called you
you
back, but
yeah.
if you don't leave me a message, if you don't text me, if you don't tell me what you're needing, and it was just relentless, and they had, a consultant just kind of on and off the scene, and I was a little bit new. I'd just been there like a month or so, and I think it was during upfront, so it was a crazy busy time, and she's like, "How do you think you're doing?" And if you had to give yourself a letter grade, I'm like, "Well, I thought, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I just
Oh my
got
god.
here."
If
And
you were a refrigerator and you had a
I
tag,
was
what would
just
your selling
I
point
just thought,
be?
"Am I
Oh,
crazy? Are you
please.
just, like, going out of your way to set me up for failure?" So I said, "I don't know. I just got here a month ago, and I'm still learning everybody's, like, sitch." So I'm like, "I guess a B minus," which I felt so demoralized having to give myself a
Really?
grade, and she goes, "Lower, much lower." And I said, "Tell 'em to fire me." I just said, "Tell 'em to fire me."
Oh.
So, they did not
Oh.
ultimately release me. I ultimately walked in, I think, after Thanksgiving. I said, "I'm giving my 2 weeks notice." And my husband's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I can't."
Really? Why don't you ask me what grade I'd give you?
Exactly. I know. I wonder whatever happened to that
Like
consultant quote. I'm air quoting, you can hear me.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I can hear your air quote against
yeah.
the mic.
So I
That's
don't
okay.
did you have experiences like that? Like this passive aggressive, sort of like toxic, I mean, kind of abusive, to be honest with you, because one of them would just say the most, again, untoward things. We had another assistant, we were in a meeting, he's like, "Hey, you got a tramp stamp?" And I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, what is wrong with you?" So I think this was just a time where they were such a smaller contained entity, and I think the person who had been director of broadcast before me lasted about 2 months, and then the
Well, there
person
you
before that,
go.
and so it's like the writing was kind of on the wall, like, "Why do you guys keep rotating through directors?" And, I thought, "Oh, no, I'll be fine." Like, that just must have been an anomaly, and then come to find out, like, no, there's a reason. So
Yeah, and sometimes smaller agencies are like that because the money is not what it is in a larger one.
right.
So they're more, I don't know, bottom line conscious and
Yeah.
micromanaging stuff. I don't know. I'm trying to make excuses as
No,
to
but
why
it
people
all
would.
makes sense. Yeah, I think they were kind of micromanaging, they were probably afraid of the budgets and things, and they were also chronically understaffed, and then
Mm. Well, no wonder.
yeah, I was gonna
Hello.
say. I mean, they didn't have an
Wonder.
HR person, so they didn't really have payroll, like, everything kind of, like, went onto my plate, and I remember one of their there was another guy that I think it was their social media, I don't know who what he was doing new content, and he's like, there was a valet because it was a small building, and he's like, "The valet dented my car," and I thought we were just having a pleasant conversation, I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that." And he's like, "Well, what are you gonna do about it?" I'm like, "Turns out I'm the director of broadcast, not in charge of these valets. I didn't hire these valets. Like, what are you talking about?" So it was
Or
just
insurance or HR.
I know,
Yeah.
I was just like I thought, "Oh, the disconnect about what you expect my role to be here." And what it
Yeah.
really is, coupled with this toxic, abusive, just, like, yelling, screaming, swearing at everyone in the staff, especially me, I'm like, "You know what? We're good.
No,
Moving on."
no, you know what? You get more bees with honey than vinegar, and you're right, that is incredibly toxic. So, okay, you're in LA
Mhm.
where people talk less about age than they do about Bruno.
Right.
So, do you care to share how old you were when you decided to leave your career in advertising to pursue a career in voice acting?
Yeah, I was you know what? I can't even remember. I wanna say I was, like, 40, so I'm over 50 now. Lots over 50. Yeah, I was definitely, I mean, a 40-year-old wannabe, it's like, you might as well just say, "Oh, I'm a wannabe supermodel." It's like, in what world? In what world, honey, are you gonna be like a 40-year-old first-time supermodel? But what also happened was, I had gone with, another friend of that I knew from post-production days. I used to work in post-production sort of in between, and we went to, like, a women's entrepreneur, women in business conference here in LA,
Mhm.
and the speaker was talking about building your business, and she quoted, I think it's, Oliver Wendell Holmes, boy, I hope I get that right, where he had said most people die with their music still inside, right?
Yes. Yeah, I
And
love that quote. It both makes me sad, and yet it's very
right,
apropos.
it's heartbreaking, right? And so my friend and I just spontaneously looked at each other, and we both started crying because she was at a transition point in
Oh.
her career. I knew that I had to find something else for myself, that and I'm like, there's something I've wanted to do all of my life, and, now's as good a time as ever. So I freelanced, I still worked in production, I took a bunch of classes, and that's how I started to build my career.
And thank you for sharing that. I would have probably started to cry. I wanna cry just even hearing that
I know,
because
it's sad, right?
we know a lot of creatives who, for whatever reason, aren't able to get their song out
Mhm.
or their music out or their voice out, what have you, and I read in your Canvas Rebel magazine article that
Thank you.
yeah, it was a great, great article, that while you don't regret taking the risk and leaving your job at the agency, in hindsight, you would have planned it a little better. And so, how would you have done it differently? And what advice would you give a listener who may be contemplating leaving their job to pursue a similar career path?
I think what I would have done, I probably wouldn't have quit my jo I literally quit my job flat without a plan B. That just felt like a necessity at the time, but I think what I would have done differently is to have managed my own expectations, because I'll be honest
Mm.
with you, it's like, I'm a conservatory trained actor. I've hired actors and listened to auditions for years and years. I know all these agents. Shouldn't I just be booking everything? Like, or shouldn't I just didn't realize at the time that it could be a slower build than just like, "Got my demos, start working." And so I think that what I would tell a newer creative is just to simply manage your expectations
Expectations.
about how
Yeah.
long it can take, and knowing that this business is a lot about relationships. So if there was anything that I would definitely tell creatives now, I think I actually did a pretty good job of this because we could do things in person, but I met a lot of people, I stayed in touch with people.
What a concept.
I know, what a concept. Well, that's why, when I'm coaching students and they're like, "Well, what do I do now?" I'm like, "Start to get known to the community as somebody that we can know, like, and trust," because a lot of I think you would probably agree, Cheryl, that we do get referrals. People do say to us, "Hey, I know you. You'd be good for this job." That's how I booked my first video game. The,
Love it.
casting reached out to me and said, uh here's a role I think you'd be good for. I'd never done a video game before that. I've never really played video. It's not my jam. And I thought, no. And they're like, just, you'd be right for it. Just give it a go. And the next morning I got an email saying, you booked it. I was like, oh, how great.
Love it. Well, that's you coming out of your comfort zone
Oh,
too, and
totally. I was
yeah.
very like, ooh, what do I do with this? But it all worked out. But that's why I always tell newer creatives, it's like, build your community, because you never know who's going to sort of be in your circle that could be helpful to you. You don't know who you can
Mhm.
help. It's a great community, so we should be a part of it. And it's hard
And
on Zoom. It's kind of hard.
we can do it, but it is very different being in person. And actually, now that you said that, I want to I have a question that's later on
Sure.
that I was going to ask you, but I
That's
might have
okay.
taken it out. I might come back to that. So, in the same article that I mentioned before, you said that we often hear about learning lessons, but just as important is unlearning lessons. What lesson or lessons have you had to unlearn?
Oh, what a great question. I still have to remind myself that, anything is possible all the way along. I
Mm.
even in voiceover, it can be challenging to be, as I don't wanna say viable, but there's st let's face it, we're a youth-oriented society. So
Yes.
I have to unlearn the lesson, like, to not just put limitations on myself just because I'm, cresting a certain age, and it's like, yeah, anything can happen. I'm a viable talent, and unlearning this sense that, well, for me, particularly since I did have a pretty great advertising career and people are like, "What are you doing?" Just unlearning this idea that, well, what anybody else thinks. I always tell people until they start paying your bills, don't worry about what anybody else thinks about what you're
Oh,
doing.
that needs to go on a loop for, I think, a lot of us, really,
Yeah,
especially in this age of social media of likes, unlikes, follow,
exactly.
unfollow, because it's crazy making. It
Yeah,
really is.
yeah.
And surrounding it, if I may add to that, surrounding ourselves with people who will encourage the narrative that
Mm.
we're telling ourselves, not to be Pollyanna or just, or
No.
to blow smoke up our skirts if in fact we were wearing them, but to affirm what you're doing, that it's not too late,
Right.
to pursue
That
something.
there is room for all of us, and maybe it won't be in the particular that's something else I was thinking about when I first got started, and I always tell people this because I just have to tell on myself. I'm like, "I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna do books and anime," and I don't do books or anime. It's not really my areas of interest. It's not something, and not because I don't like books or anime. I love audiobooks, and I think anime is brilliant, but it's just, like, not for me. So, a career can look all kinds of different ways. I have lots of colleagues who make a fabulous career, and they do e-learning and corporate, and I do a
Mhm.
lot of that stuff too. Is it the most glamorous? So when people say, "Oh, you're a voice actor, what would I have heard you in?" I'm like, "Have you listened to the medical portal for the Physician's Assistant Society? That's one place you'd have heard me lately." Yeah, so does it need to be glamorous? No?
But you know what? For the person who needs that information and you deliver it in the way that they consume it and it helps them, you're providing that service.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's the value we place on, okay, so is a video game better than a book on tape, better than e-learning? No, there's no,
No.
it's
Yeah,
whatever value we put on it.
right.
And but at the same time, it's interesting what you talked about. It's not your lane. Of course, it's good to know our strengths and our lane, but also being open to, like you were, the video game where you say, "Well, I don't
Definitely.
really do it. I haven't done it." And you did it and then you booked it. So there you go.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to explore anything they're interested in, and I always think to myself, "Well, if I say yes now, I could probably say no later." So if I say yes to an
Mm,
opportunity right now, great, let me pursue it to its logical conclusion, and then if it's like, yeah, it turns out I'm not good at this." I mean, I would never let somebody down if I said, "Yes, I'm committed to doing this and I will take care of it for you." But exploring something, let me explore it, let me say yes. But if I say no now, the chances that somebody's gonna come back around and say, "Okay, now, do you wanna try
again,
it again?"
yeah.
They're gonna be like, "No, the answer was no." So I feel like, yes now, no later. Whereas if I say no now, the opportunity to say yes later probably isn't as likely.
Yeah, that's good. My husband and I have a saying that say yes and adjust accordingly.
Oh, I love that's great. See, that goes on a mug.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'm
Okay,
good.
we have some mugs. Can I get a mug over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, trust me, I'm such a merchandise freak. Every time I think of something, I'm like, "Oh, that'd be good on a t-shirt or a mug." And it's like, how many mugs can you have? How many
No,
t-shirts can you
I gotta visit your merch shop, Cheryl.
I don't have one, but you can visit
Uh-huh.
it.
Well, look at us coming up with revenue streams.
Well, actually, I have it's funny you say that. I have been thinking about a couple of things, so we'll talk
Love
later.
it.
We'll
Sign
discuss.
me up.
So, take us back to the moment you realized that voice acting was the path you wanted to pursue, and what fears, if any, you faced at the time, and what specific tools or faith helped you confront those fears or doubts?
Oh, wow. So, Cheryl, you're just a brilliant question asker. So, one of the first times I started thinking about, besides being in a session, like I always talk about this when I was in like someplace like Margarita Mix or LA Studios, and these are recording studios here in Los Angeles where we used to do a lot of our work. And talent would come in, and I would just think, I'm doing my side. Like I'm directing them, I'm working with my clients, with my creative director, but they're just crushing it on the other side of the glass. And I just started to feel like, boo, why do they get to do it? I want to do this too.
Mm,
And so that was when I really started to think, well, I work in advertising. I know a lot of agents. I know other producers. So what can I do to start moving the ball forward? And honestly, one of my fears was, what are people going to say about this? Like, I am of a
mm.
particular age. I've been doing a particular job for a while, and are people going to, I mean, I was literally afraid that people were going to be like, "Who do you think you are? Like, you're not supposed to be doing this. We don't want you." So, I had to remind myself that just because I think it doesn't make it so, like not to believe everything my mind tells me.
Oh my gosh, is that so that
Right?
you
Yes.
yes, bing, 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 right
I'm
there,
glad that
yes.
resonates. Right? Because
Oh, yeah,
how many stories do we tell ourselves about "I can't," or "It's too late," or "It's never possible"? And I thought, none of that is true just 'cause I'm thinking it in the moment, that I don't have any
exactly.
evidence that says I won't be successful. And so I really had to disabuse myself of the notion that, of my own honestly, of my own negative thinking and just worries about what other people would think. And it's like, again, they don't pay our bills. So, I'm gonna do me.
Amen.
Yeah.
That goes on a T-shirt, "I'm gonna do me."
Yay.
Yes, yay! No, I
Everyone should
love that.
do them. Yeah, right?
It's the voices, it's the age we live in that
Yeah.
we're just and teens are suffering from it now, just being so consumed by what they think they should be and look like and
Yeah.
everything else, and I know that's a whole other topic, but
No, I agree, and it's very challenging, and social media, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm so glad there was no social media when I was growing up.
you and me
I
both,
don't know that
sister.
I'd be okay.
Oh
It's like
my no, I know I wouldn't.
yeah, I would be a
I know I wouldn't.
horrible hot mess. You'd have to be checking on me all the time because I would not have thrived as a kid with social media because I think social media is important for us as actors. We're public figures. People want to
Mhm,
hear our work. They want to see what it's like to work with us. But that's entirely different than trying to craft a life that's like or an online life that looks like
mhm.
I'm amazing. I'm never unhappy or everything's always great all the time. I'm like, no, I'm here to tell you it's not always great all the time. Life is challenging. But as an actor, I feel like using social media is important for businesses. And that's why I don't really post much that's personal. It's just mostly about the industry. And I love to shout out other creatives. It's really important to me to support my fellow creatives. That's part of my sort of mission as well.
You do that very well, by
Well,
the
thank
way.
you.
You very, very well. I love your pages and
Thank you.
the content that you post. And by the way, your headshots that you have on SoundCloud are just lovely
Oh,
and
thank
gorgeous.
you so much. That shout out to Joanna DeGeneres and Dana Patrick. Those are the
Oh, I was gonna ask
yeah.
you if any of them were because that's who I have on my list as someone who I want to do my pictures.
Definitely, I highly recommend both. They're both fantastic, and I was so happy. And I'm sure as actors, you and I can both agree, we've had some headshots where they're just like, "Oh, no. No, 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 no." It can be very
Yeah, and the
frustrating.
sad thing is mine went out, where yours probably didn't, but yeah,
No, I'm
mine
sure
went
you
out. It's like, "Isn't this good? It was $1,500, it better be good." No, it isn't.
Oh, I know
Um,
it ain't cheap. That's the other thing I remind people about this business. It is a business, and there are startup costs. So just something to be aware of, not to be discouraging, but just say, if you're in it to win it, there's gonna be some startup costs.
like anything,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
I
for
mean,
true.
if you're gonna work in a law office, you gotta buy all the clothes and the shoes
Right.
and or
Go to
all
school.
whatever goes with it. Go to school. Yeah, hello. Do you have a bucket list role that you'd like to do?
Um, I honestly would like to book more animation, and I don't really necessarily have a bucket list role for that, but, that video game experience was really delightful, and as a primarily commercial actor and narrator, I don't do a ton of characters, so I would like to get a little bit deeper into some character work where I can just be a little more not me and a little, like, sillier or goofier.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah,
yeah. How about you? Do you
do
have
it.
one?
I live in Pixar country,
Yeah, you do.
and I've auditioned for them a couple of
Yeah,
times.
me too.
So, quick story. A friend of mine who has been on the show,
Mhm.
she just started to get into voiceover after being in the medical field as a therapist for 40 years.
Wow.
Her name is Laura Mooney, and
Wow.
she's very creative. She studied acting early in her years like you.
Yeah,
She wanted to be an actress, but got into the medical field, and then she got back to her second love after she retired. Very long story short,
got it.
she she got an audition for Pixar, and she goes, "Well, is Pixar a thing? I mean, are they?"
What? Honey, what? Is Pixar a
Yeah,
thing?
well, that wasn't her thing because she was into audiobooks, and that wasn't, again, it wasn't her world for so
Yeah.
long that I said, "Yes, it's a thing. You need to audition for this." And she did, and she thought she was going in for a callback into Pixar.
Mhm.
Well, it turned out she has a role in Soul
You're right
that
on. Oh my gosh.
let's chat about A Face for Radio.
No,
First of
thank
all,
you.
I love the name.
Yes, that's my colleague and, co-coach, that's Cole Critchell.
You mentioned that you help aspiring voice actors find their signature voice.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So, signature voice for actors, I always think of it as like we have fingerprints, we have voice prints. And so, for me, what really opened up my career for me was really understanding what my own signature voice is. Like, what do you get when Jen Sims is on the mic? So that's how
Okay.
I describe I'm quirky, I'm smart, I'm pithy. I guess I think all these things about myself. But it's just sort of like, who are we very specifically and individually as voice actors? And I think the reason I feel that way is I just tried to ride the middle ground when I got started. I just tried to be sort of like what I thought I was hearing on the air for commercial or what I thought something should sound like. And the truth is, casting is becoming more and more, or voiceover casting, from my opinion, is becoming more and more interested in authenticity and hearing more diverse, like, sounds and voices, and so they're really getting away, and I think, Cheryl, you and I can probably vouch for this as we get at these auditions. You'll see all the time, no typical voiceover actors. So what they're really asking is for us to be who we are. Like, what is our point of view? What's our taste like? What's our sense of humor like? And so that's how I think voice actors get more successful, when they're not trying to pigeonhole themselves into something that they're not, but just fully embracing their specificity of themselves. A specific actor is a booking actor. So the more specific I can be with, like, what I'm bringing to the read in terms of my signature voice, I think it just makes me more bookable.
Love it, because otherwise they wouldn't hire you, they'd
Mhm.
hire somebody else.
Exactly, and my point of
I
view is different than, your point of view is different, my point of view is different, and casting and buyers are listening for that, like, "Oh, do they align with my message, and does their point of view sound like it's on team with mine, and do I like this?" And I just think that, and I've heard this a few times from casting agencies here in LA, that they are really wanting us to sound natural, a little less polished, and just be ourselves. Just a little, like, we're even seeing words like unique and quirky on castings where we never used to see that. So they're really listening for stuff that just perks their ears up a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny, I keep thinking of the Elvis song, a little,
A little less
well, less
conversation, a
well,
little
he
more
says a little
action.
less conversation, a little more action, I'm thinking,
Is that what we're doing? Yeah.
yeah, but no, a little more conversation.
Yes. I think because I've been on both sides of the glass, it's a little easier for me to help a voice actor find their signature voice, because sometimes it's hard to be objective about our own work. And so I was working with a wonderful coach and voice actor here in LA, Art Butler, and he sort of directed me into a place. He's like, "Well, there's your money voice." And I'm like, "Huzzah, I have a money voice." And it was just not an area or an attitude or point of view that I was really adopting in a lot of my reads. And he's like, "I think this is where you really need to focus." And I'm like, "Great, let's do more of that then." So,
Are you? So are you doing
yeah.
more of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you've been in voiceover for a minute, you know that I shouldn't say the only, but for the most part in commercial, the trend that's booking and has forever being conversational. And I'm theatrically trained. I'm kind of a a quirky personality anyway. And so it was really challenging to find a good, natural conversational read. And so once I started to get a little bit more relaxed and learn a little bit more about voiceover and practice more, I think I have a much more solid sense of my own conversational read, and it seems to be working, so
Quirky is perfect for animation.
yes.
Absolutely perfect. That's Laura Mooney, the one I mentioned before. She's very quirky. She
Perfect.
just has a quirk to the way she speaks.
Oh,
It's not put on, it's not affected. It's just who she
yeah.
is. And so it works. And I will definitely encourage you
Thank you.
to use that part of authentic Jen for
Yeah,
your
I do. I
animation
actually
read.
anymore, it's funny, I have another friend who's a voice actor, Steve Mackle, and he's just hilarious and brilliant, and I think he's still doing the voice for Fallon for late night, and he said, "Only once in a while will a booth director or a client say, 'Just read the script exactly as it is.'" And I really took away from that conversation, I'm like, "You know what? I'm not going to improvise the entire script because it's not about me, particularly if it's commercial, but there's rarely an opportunity that I'll miss to add a little something to the script."
And that's the one that's going to stand out
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I think we have to be judicious about it. I think if you're a little newer, you wanna be a little more circumspect about, like, "Is this a good place to improvise, or is this a good thing to say?" So,
Yeah, you do one read of total respect,
yeah,
and the other, your second read, you do
yeah,
you. And that what we said, that's our
I
mug.
love
Here's my mug. It says, "You do
I'm
you."
doing me on take 2, maybe take 3, maybe take 1. Yeah, I just think it's, it's sort of that ask forgiveness rather than permission. It's like, I'd rather
Mm,
zig while everyone else is
th
gonna zag, you
zag.
know?
Yes. Oh, I'm applauding. That's gonna be
Yes, I know we can do
obnoxious
the
on
same
your
show.
mic, but
Yeah.
yes. Yes, 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 yes. So, in the midst of everything that you're juggling, being an actor, a coach, a wife, a person living in
Yeah.
LA, which that in of itself deserves an award.
Why, thank you. I'm waiting for someone to throw me a parade in this town, but they're like,
Yes,
"Oh, okay,
yes,
lady."
well, they do every day on the
Yeah, they
405. You just
do,
don't know it's for you,
right.
Jen.
All these cars
Um,
for me.
what makes you hopeful?
What makes me hopeful is that in terms of the business, the industry is still thriving. I know we have challenges with what's coming down the pike with AI reaching the event horizon, I think sooner than many of us, I mean, at least me, expected. That the business is just still thriving. There's still lots of content out there. There's ways we can create our own content and be heard and seen as actors. I'm mostly thinking about as an on-camera actor, but also as a voice actor too. And that what makes me hopeful is our community, the voiceover community is just delightful. They're generous, they're
Mhm.
open, they're kind, and so it just makes me hopeful to be in such a terrific group of like-minded creatives. Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Cheryl, I appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. Is there something else you'd like to talk about as it relates to this time in your life?
Um, I was thinking the other day about how as women at 50, a little over, or women in this country over 50, I think we're about 20% of the population. And it's interesting to me how we're still hearing, and this is not to diss the men, I love all our male creative siblings, but men are still getting about 60% of the commercial voiceover world, women about 40%. And even if it's for like products or services that are aimed specifically at like our demographic, women over 50. And so I've just been thinking a lot about how hopefully that evens out soon. I know that, was it Christy Harst was on your yeah, and she really inspired me about her Building Doors campaign. I don't know that there's a way to do that commercially because just being from the advertising agency side, I know that there's just a lot of male voices that get chosen or cast, but I'm thinking women have about 85% of the decision making where consumer spending is concerned,
Mhm.
and so I'm,
Yep.
like, hoping and thinking, like, how can we help advertisers realize that, our voices, whether we're 20, 30, 40, 50, or beyond, are very viable for their markets and to speak to us a little bit more by using female voice talent. And again, that's not to diss the guys. They're fantastic. But it's always surprising to me when I hear a male voice on a product, service, app, etc. It's like, but you're specifically targeting women and women of a certain age,
Yes.
and you're still using the men? Okay.
think the awareness, like through Christy Harst, just the awareness of women being more fully present, speaking about
Yeah.
it and speaking about it to the decision makers. Everett Oliver, I listened to a podcast that he was on last week, and his take was very interesting. This is not getting political. I am quoting something he shared, which was food
No
for
worries.
thought, because he travels the world. He's been in the business a very long time. He knows a lot of people and really kind of goes behind the scenes in the thinking of the business, if you
Mhm.
will. And he made a very, in his kind of an astute observation, he said, look, if Kamala Harris wins, the opportunities for women are going to be
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
Definitely for women of color, but for women in
That
general.
would be great.
If it goes the other way, it might actually go the opposite way. So,
Yeah.
all the more reason to vote a certain way. I'm just saying, as women, all the more reason to
Oh,
vote a certain
well.
way.
I'll give you an amen on that one, Cheryl.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I try
Okay,
not to be
yes.
terribly political because I'm a respecter of all opinions. Everybody has a reason for why they think things, but, I have a reason why.
Well, so I'm just gonna say to our listeners right now, if you wanna help Jen and I out, excel in our career, our
Yes,
voiceover career, then vote for
there you go.
Kamala because it'll
Right.
help us.
And
Per
and
Everett
most
Oliver
women, or a lot of women,
and
I
most women.
think.
Yes,
I
yes,
shouldn't be
exactly.
so
But
definitive about that. Somebody's gonna come after us, Cheryl.
that's okay. You know what? You can never please everybody, and that goes along with aging, is
It's true.
that we're not trying to hurt
No.
anybody, we're not trying to offend
Mm-mm.
anybody, we're just speaking our
Right.
truth, and hopefully that'll lay on soft ears, and if not, it's not anything we
Yeah,
can
I mean,
control. Anyway,
we all have our opinions. We're all entitled to them, and, those happen to be mine.
there you go, it happens to be
Right
mine as well.
on.
Right on,
Yeah.
sister. So, hey, if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would be on it and why?
Oh, um, a lot of, uh I have to harken back to my youth. I still listen to a lot of U2 and The Police, and so I think a lot of, 80s and 90s bops, and it's because, I just loved, when I was younger, dancing around and going to clubs and listening to this music, so just because it's joyful, just awesome bops that make you move and make you feel good.
Well, and there's a reason why it's still being played.
Yeah, exactly. I know, it's like, "Oh, dear, now it's not my politics that are gonna get me canceled, it's my taste in music that's gonna get me."
That's fine, you don't have to qualify it.
No, I'm kidding, none of the no, I know. I think the other thing we listen to a lot at my house is Motown and the oldies, and again, it's just because it's kind of like a lot of feel-good music that just kinda gets you up and moving, so and I'm optimistic in general.
Yes, and I sense
Thank
that. That's why you and I are talking because I love your
I love it.
optimism, and I will have in the show notes how people can get a hold of
Yeah.
you. It
Your
just
podcast, I'm just inspired. Like I said, I listened to Christie's episode and I've listened
thank
to and they're
you.
just truly, I mean, honestly, Cheryl, it's just a force of nature. It's beautiful to listen to. It really is.
You're so
No, it's
you're
true.
so kind. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's just my way of both learning and because it's my schooling, but it's also contributing in any way I can to encourage people because you may have heard me say it, maybe not, but my original podcast was geared towards people over 55.
Oh.
It was called Thrive After
Oh, I didn't yeah,
55.
I missed that.
Yeah, and that's okay, and I sat on that idea for years and years and years until I was after 55, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, "Oh, holy crap, we're dealing with a lot of fear." I still wanted to talk to creatives, though, and find out how they're
Yeah.
dealing with fear, but also address what was going on with the pandemic and how do we move beyond that.
Yeah,
So,
those were,
um,
crazy days. Not my favorite. Mm.
no, not
No,
anybody.
right.
So, Jen Sims,
I go by both.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
You
Yeah,
go
I
by
go
both.
that's why
Do you prefer one
no,
over the other?
mm-mm. I go by Jennifer or Jen. That's why I said Jennifer, sort of parens Jen, because, both I like having all the names.
Well, they
Like, please call me all the
okay.
good names.
Good
Call me
names,
lots of
good
names.
names. We want
Yeah.
good names. Yes.
Lots of nicknames.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you
so
so much.
much for joining me. This has been a delight, and we will meet.
Yes,
I'm gonna come to LA
please.
and find you, and go,
Oh,
"Jen!"
Cheryl, I'm gonna have to kind of insist upon it that we are gonna hang
Okay.
and do some IRL hanging out and chat some more chatting for sure. Please.
Yes,
Yeah,
we'll do that.
it's
Wonderful. Thank you
imperative.
so
Thank you,
much.
Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being Hannah. Meow. On
Love
that
it, love it.
note.
I got
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. Theme music used with permission by Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the group for King and Country. If you'd like to offer feedback or a story idea, email me at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via my website at cherylhalling.com, or follow me on Instagram at cherylhallingvo. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Dangerous. Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.